needed to make another video about my biological father. One of the reasons that I think he was at least at one point still alive when I was 25 years old was because when I worked in Standard Register, not Standard Register, it's Advanced Graphics, where I talked about that Gary Gwynn. I remember he did this a couple of times to me, but particularly this specific time, he tried to inject into my eyes pure confusion and homosexuality. It was the only way that I could ever remember that. It was that of a child molester. When my uncle raped me, and my brother. I had a few other relatives that raped me and my brother, molested me, and that's as specific, and a transgender as well. That they try to pour their homosexuality into you, like to confuse you because you're still young. And I remember him doing that. And I backed off like this. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? And I kind of put my hands like, what the fuck? And he was trying to target me, like trying to confine me and control me. But anyway, when I was working there was a guy at the very back toward the exit. And he was a Mexican guy, tall, and he worked making t-shirts. He was the printer guy that does t-shirts. Well, they used him as a reference point to relate him to my biological father. The way that he did, the way that happened was that there was only one guy that I worked with in the same room that I was in. Occasionally Monica would show up, or some other people do some other activities or whatever, like decals or whatever. But this guy always worked on the other side of the wall of the room with a high-tech printer. It was like a DI printer, and I remember him. He was a Native American Indian guy, but he was gay. And I remember him saying to me, "Yeah, you know that guy right over there?" He goes, "Yeah, he used to drive 18-wheelers for a long time. He used to drive 18-wheelers for a long time, and he quit, and he came over here working." He goes, "Yeah," and he would always do this to him, "Yeah, like this, like, yeah, fuck him." Like, to me, I had no idea that I have a different biological father. Then he tells me, "Yeah, you know that guy right over there? He had a heart attack. He had a heart attack like 6 or 8 months ago, a year ago. He left for a while, but he came back and he's working over there. He's thinking about going back and working 18-wheelers again. He's about to retire. And so they run all these games on me. Monica, she was a real female, but she looks just like Sarah Cooper. I mean, yeah, the one that's in control over my mother, and Gary Gwynn, and I don't remember the other guy's name, but I don't think that was in. I'm almost positive he's not alive anymore, because he was already old at that time. But he looked very Native American Indian. And I remember him telling me, this is how the homosexuals went after me, because they went after him. And this is how they even felt even more patriotic about Kenneth Cooper at the radio station. And they would intentionally come after me and attack me in the defense of him, and in the efforts to make him the hero and just fight for their breed and their kind, their group of people. And I was always working in this big room. It was a big space room, and there was like 4 printers, 3 gigantic, huge Docutech printers. But I remember them telling me about this guy, saying that, "Oh, that guy over there had a heart attack." He goes, "He used to drive 18-wheelers. And what happened was I remember that there used to be 18-wheeler drivers that would come by and drop off a lot of, I know they're making me pass gas right now. They would come by to drop off their load of papers or whatever it was, and they would just park their car and whatever, open the truck as they're spending the time unloading. They would come over to the printer area where I was working in this big room, and there's all these printers and this other guy. And they'd always go talk to this other guy, the 18-wheeler driver. And this 18-wheeler driver was a transgender, really heavy set transgender woman that dressed like a man. And used to wear a very thick bracelet. Like and when they walked in like, I'm running this show. This is my house. I say what goes. I'm going to put order back in this place. And I never met this person, and it took. This person would occasionally show up once every 2 weeks or once a month or something like that. And I remember the way that they came in. They walked into the room like this. They walked in like, and I didn't know who this person was, so it was hard for me to relate to anything that I was doing or anything that they knew about me that had anything to do with it. So then becomes very difficult for me to not to really get upset. But I just know it isn't a good vibe. You know, why is this person behaving this way? I don't know who they are. And they'd always talk to this guy. And after about 2 or 3 months, this person showing up once a month, the guy told me, he goes, yeah, you see that? Yeah, you know that person that comes in here? They're a truck driver. They drive the trucks, and they come over here and talk to me every once in a while. So they were in riots. This person was in riot in defense of Kenneth Cooper, 97.9 The Beat, DJ Keno, because he's a transgender homosexual. These faggots that all grew up together. You'll have a few of the different ones that don't. It's extremely rare. But I just know, and I say this because if my biological father was an 18-wheeler driver, you got to understand that when I was working for this company, this is like right after my bone marrow transplant, these people are in full riot because they think my father's just a homosexual. They think my dad's just gay and he's not having sex with my mom, and so it doesn't matter. He's one of their gays. And so they know how the gay man thinks, how the gay man sees the world, how the gay man understands the world, how the gay man plans in the future for being homosexual. And that wasn't the truth. So I wanted to say this because when I was working for that company, they were bashing the fact that my biological father, I think, was still alive, and my father, who had been dead now for about 5 or 6 years. And I think that it's important for me to talk about. I think it's very important for me to talk about this because the guy that worked over there was always being referenced to me. And and you got to understand that no matter what people are telling me, I don't know what you're talking about because I don't know that I have a different biological father. I saw and heard my father having sex with my mother. There was not any reason for me to think I saw them. So if you want to say that, well, then he was having sex with my mother and he was bisexual, but really he was gay, but he just felt like he needed to do that in order to survive. So I think it's important for me to talk about. This is one of the reasons why Frankie would want to talk and would have abandoned my father, because my dad told him, you know, that I remember they had this homosexual experience when I was a kid, when he like let him know, like, yeah, you know how we're straight men too, you know, we're gay, but we do it the man way, gay way, you know. And I remember Frankie kind of being sort of proud to be gay, but after a couple of years later, this is when my dad started getting the penis pump, and he started getting like Viagra. They didn't even have Viagra at that time, but he was figuring out ways to make his penis larger. And so he knew he was having sex with my mom. And so that's why Frank, because he's not homosexual, just purebred homosexual gays. So I think it's important for me to talk about because these people take full ownership. I'm young. I don't understand. Remember, I'm young. I'm 25 years old. I don't know any of this. Not only I don't know it, but I'm young. I just got out of the hospital. And there's this big war of money and who gave the house and who gave the kid away and all this other shit that's going on. So I want to make a video about this, that I think I'm almost, because if my biological father was not alive, if my biological father was not alive when I was 25 years old to 26 years old when I was working there, they wouldn't have brought him up like that. They wouldn't have brought him up because he's dead. There's no story. They would have already asked my mother, Frankie, and Julian all the stories, and then they would have gossiped, and then they would have told them everything, and then they came at me for it because that's what they were doing already. But if he was dead, you know, they wouldn't have brought him up as intense as they did. But I want to say that they said that he had a heart attack because Monica came over to me, and her role, she looks just like Sarah Cooper. Her role was to come over to me and let me know she was in charge of everything, like the way, because she was the manager there. And she said, she came over to me and she was sniffling up a handkerchief. She goes, yeah, he had a heart attack over there. And then left. And she would come over to the computer station where I was and then would leave. So this is one of the reasons why I think my biological father's still alive. So I thought I would make a video about this because my biological father is being brought up to me and I'm being persecuted for it. You don't understand that these homosexuals, they think and they believe in a different way in what they think they understand, but they just want to go protect and defend their homosexual gays, their gay fellow member, and their fellow gay community member, Kenneth Cooper, at the radio station. It doesn't matter what the circumstances is. Even though they're entirely wrong, it doesn't going to change that that's how they feel. And that isn't going to change anything, no matter what the circumstances. They don't understand. They don't care to understand. They just want to find a reason that they're gay and their fights, and they know what's best for Raymond and what the circumstances is for my mother. And then I don't know because I was just going after my dad's money. I was just trying to steal his money. I was just using my dad so I can go over this way. And that they don't know anything. But it doesn't change the fact that I suffer those consequences at my job site. I suffer those consequences when somebody comes very aggressive and does this type of behavior. It doesn't change the circumstances, what they believe. And I have to deal with something that has nothing to do with me and has nothing to do with their business. They are playing police officer over me. And then there was police officers giving me 40-something fucking tickets on the highway. So I think it's important for me to talk about this. It is too late, but I don't know if my biological father's dead. I don't think he is. Sometimes he might be deceased. But I do strongly somewhat believe that he was at least alive when I was 25 or 26 years old. I really do believe that part. Because they wouldn't have brought this guy up several times. They kept on saying he was an 18-wheeler driver. He went to prison. This is what they told me. But they wouldn't ever say his name. Yeah, you know that guy right there? Yeah, you know that guy, the Mexican guy, that dark-haired guy right there? Yeah, you know that guy right there? Yeah, he went to prison. He went to prison before. Yeah, you know that guy right there? He used to drive 18-wheelers for about 20 years, but he retired and didn't like it anymore, so he came over here. So he's saying, oh, Hector doesn't like it anymore, so then he came over there. Oh, he's a traitor. And that's how they're treating me there. And that's how the homosexuals are treating me there. But I don't know anything. It doesn't matter. That's what they're doing. And they told me, yeah, and then he waits a couple of weeks later, a couple of days later, he goes, yeah, you know that guy over there? Yeah, he was homeless. He was living in his truck for like 6 months. That guy and he was basically telling me, he's like, that guy's a bum. He goes, that guy was living in his truck. So everything that they keep referencing he was a truck driver. He was, I think he said that he could have been a drunk as well, but I don't remember that part. But he was an 18-wheeler. He lived 6 months homeless in his truck. He had a heart attack. And he said that guy had been working there for 20 years. He used to be he used to drive 18-wheelers all the time as well. That's what they reference him. So if he's still alive, and I find out that he went to prison, he was an 18-wheeler truck driver, and he had a heart attack, bingo, but I'm suffering those consequences. And Gary Gwynn was, I can't explain it was a very disgusting behavior, because I know that he was trying to confuse me, and this is one of the craziest, disgusting things they did to me. And I remember like backing off, and then he came over to me a second or third time, and I remember them shot something in, I don't know what electronic device, but it made my eyes completely just do this, like fall to the ground or some shit, like fall. And I was still conscious, and I was like, what the like I was going blind, like my eyes were falling out of my head or something. It was, I don't know what the fuck it was. And I remember being very scared, because it happened right whenever they told Gary Gwen to come over in front of me. And I believe that the reason was because they caught cameras doing that to me. And so they told him to come over to me again, and then they used the electronic devices, and my eyes just drooped to the fucking floor. And I was like, and I remember getting really scared, like, what the fuck? And I immediately thought I was having a stroke or a brain hemorrhage or like a tumor in my brain, because I never, for my eyes to droop like that to the like that to fall, it was, I've never had anything or heard of anything like that happening, other than I already had a disease, and thinking that maybe this disease did more brain damage than I thought. So I thought it was important for me to talk about this, because I think my biological father, he might be alive, but I believe that he was strong. He had that heart attack, because they told me this guy had a heart attack. I don't know who this, no one wants to believe me that I don't know who this guy, I don't know anybody named Hector that was my biological father, that I was named after to honor, that just when my mother wanted that. None of that. So, that's what I want to say about this. And the reason it's so toxic is because when my father who raised me, when they went over to him and say, "Oh, he's not, you're gay, and you raised a kid that's not yours," yeah, and then my dad gets down low, he goes, "Yeah, I wanted a family." Well, that's not the case, because my biological father did surrender me to him in somewhat conversation. So when they did this to my father and said, "Don't ever talk to Hector again," and put him in Fort Worth and he's gone, the reason they did that is because it plays in the cards for their homosexuality, and that was the truth. My father was fucking my mother, and that was happening by the time I was 5 or 6 years old. Something else I want to say, talk to Michaela. Michaela, you may remember this. When the astronaut showed up at Good Elementary, and he was talking to the entire class, and he said he spoke to Neil Armstrong, the guy that landed on the moon for the first time. And this guy was an astronaut during the same, like the second mission afterwards. It's important for me to talk to Michaela for you to understand that you may be able to remember this, and you'll verify this. I was in 5th grade in Miss Heather's class, I believe, when this guy showed up. He was wearing an all-blue suit. And when he was talking, at the end of the conversation, I want to say that I recall Michaela was sitting somewhere in the very front row. And because all the little kids sit in like kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 6th grade usually sits all the way in the very back because they're taller. There wasn't the entire school that was there, but it was most of the school. But I want to say that Michaela was in that class, and I remember her jumping up as all the other kids approached this white guy with blonde hair, resembled the Ken Cooper race, and was like doing this. And I remember Michaela, I want to say, stood up and was trying to talk to this guy, like was trying to get an autograph or something like that. And I stood, and I want to say that I stood and I looked at Michaela. And I remember thinking to Michaela, why? I mean, it's so weird. I know it's weird to talk about, but I remember distinctively feeling like, why do I think you're connected to me? You are connected to me by something else. I don't know what it was. It's weird. You're connected to me. So I remember just kind of looking, and I remember her hair. That's what I remember, the back of her head, her hair, and with all these other kids, because I was in 5th grade whenever she was being introduced. when we were walking, when I talked about Michaela, when we crossed paths and you took a look at me, and the teachers paused us at both positioned in the middle of the hallway where they were walking all the kids, and they both signaled, and we stopped right toward one another and we looked. That was why. So when this guy showed up, this guy was referencing you because Michael Jackson and the homosexual rape. That's why he said, except for that one. And it kind of looks away like, so I think it's important to talk about this, because that guy showed up in a reference to you immediately, the reference of Michael Jackson and Miguel, the astronaut. So figured I would say something about that. But I remember Michaela, you're the only one that can verify this, that you stood up immediately to try to talk to a guy with like 15 other kids. Not all the kids went up to him. There's a bunch of them that didn't, like me and myself, that were just walking. They wanted to ask him questions. So I thought I would bring that up. Michaela, you'll be able to remember the conversation that guy had, just knowing that it did happen, and you were there. Because once you verify it, bingo, you can say that I was telling the truth. But I was older, I'd be able to remember more of the conversation what it was. You may be able to remember, I don't know how well your memory is, but I thought I'd make that video for more verification.